Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to pick up where the Minister who just resumed her seat has left off, because the reason that we are debating this issue in the House at all today is because the Speaker has deemed that there is ministerial responsibility for what has occurred. And you'd never know it, listening to the speeches from the National Party, that actually there is ministerial responsibility on this issue, and they need to take it an awful lot more seriously, because so far their contributions have all been about what the police should have done, and the police this and the police that, and SIFs this and SIFs that. Ministers, take some responsibility, because until that happens, we will not crack this one. We will not crack this one. This was the case that shocked a nation. Why did it shock the nation? Actually sadly not because people didn't believe it was happening. People know in their communities this type of thing is happening. It shocked a nation because people thought, how could this have happened? How could this group of young men have been subjecting a large group of young women to sexual abuse, to rape, to have been so confident about their right to do that, that they gloated on social media about it, that young women had sought justice from the police and nothing happened. Nothing happened. For 2 years this went on and nothing happened. How could that be? That is what shocked the nation, sadly. Sadly, the nation was shocked about that rather than the fact that it happened at all. Why is that? Because what this case exposed was an underbelly of sexism that we all know in our hearts exists in this country, and we have not addressed it. We have not addressed it because we want to blame someone else. We want to blame the police, or, as ministers, they want to talk about what Child and Youth and Family did wrong. And yes, those agencies did let those young women down, but there is ministerial responsibility. How could it be? How could it be that at the height of the Baisley review, after everything that was exposed in the Louise Nicholas case and how her issues were ignored by police, how could it be that at the height of the implementation of that review, it all happens all over again? I want to stand up on behalf of New Zealand women and say we've had enough. We've had enough of our issues not be taken seriously. We've had enough of the duck shoving that goes on around this. No more. We must address it now. The Minister who just resumed her seat has done a little bit of rewriting of history, and I think that's a great shame. I think that's a great shame that that's occurred in this debate, because one of the fundamental things at the base of this case is what the law says about sexual assault. What the law says and what the police policies uphold is that the police actually don't need a complaint in order to prosecute for sexual assault. And yet, there were two ministers already on their feet today in this House making the same mistake all over again. The Minister for Police at question time saying that the only way that these victims could get their issue addressed is to raise yet another complaint, or to add some more detail to their complaints that have already been placed before the police. But that is wrong, because the police policies say that they can pursue a prosecution for sexual assault without a complaint having actually been lodged. So it seems that the ministers have not learnt a thing through this exercise. They've not learnt a thing. We had the Minister, Anne Tolley, who was the Minister at the time, just resume her seat, who said in the day that the issue, exploded onto the media, she said that the police had done a full investigation And she said that the reason why they couldn't prosecute, or they hadn't prosecuted those young men involved, was because they had had no formal complaint. Well, it turns out that she'd been advised wrongly, but imagine for a minute that that was the case. Even if that was the case, that there had been no formal complaint, the police's own policies say they didn't need a complaint in order to pursue those charges of rape, or what these days the law calls sexual assault. And that should have happened. So I really want the House to understand that even the Minister's responses today, after all of the reviews and decisions and all of the debate and discussion, still isn't understanding what is required to happen here. And I won't feel that we have done our job until these issues are addressed. Because, yes, I want to make sure it never happens again, but I also want to make sure that what has already occurred gets addressed, that justice is done for these young women. Because these young women have already been subjected to enough. Do they really, Minister, need to make yet another complaint in order to have their issues addressed? Because that's not what the law says, and it's not what the police policies say, and it's not, in fact, what the Minister himself told me in answers to written questions in November last year. That's why I was asking the Minister today. In November last year, you gave me answers to questions that clearly outlined that the police had not done their homework and investigated this properly and pursued all the options. Why has he sat on his hands and done nothing and waited and waited and waited for many more months until today's inquiry comes out, today's report comes out, and even then says the young women had to do something more still to get their issues addressed? Minister, stand up for victims, stand up for the women in New Zealand, because we really have had enough. Mr. Speaker, in the Minister's response in this debate, he talked about the Loves Me Not program that is being rolled out by Leslie Elliott. It is a fantastic program. I think we all agree on that. And I'm not going to shy away. I'm not going to shy away from saying where is the funding to support this program. Because if we can't ask that question in this debate, what on earth are we doing having this discussion at all? I am going to ask about the funding, because we need to, by our actions, by the prioritisation we give to funding, by everything that we do, denounce what has happened in this case. Because I want to say again, there was something in our society that made these young boys, these young men, feel so confident about their right to abuse those young women in that way that they didn't feel guilty about it, they didn't feel upset about it, they didn't feel any contrition about it, they gloated about it. They gloated about it. And that's the sort of thing that we've got to stop. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anything that occurred in the 2 years before the media had to expose this case. I, by the way, will not dignify it with the name that it's become known by, because that is the name that those young men chose to make themselves feel heroic and to denigrate once again the young women who they were abusing. I refuse to actually dignify it by giving it that name. This was teenage rape that was occurring. That is what we should call it. I'm not going to use that other phrase to refer to it. Mr. Speaker, I don't feel any comfort from anything that I have heard from the government today on this issue. I don't believe they have learnt a thing, and I want to see a much stronger response.